So in today's video, I'm going to make a cheese knife. Now I've made a video like that before, but this one's a little bit different because over the Christmas break, I went to an antique secondhand store and I found all of these antique knife blades that had either very broken handles or just didn't have handles at all. And they're just so beautiful, and I thought I could upcycle them. I could turn them into usable knives again. And I have my new favorite twig that I like to cast in copper for the handle of knives. This has all come about over the Christmas break, where I actually had some time just to make whatever I wanted to make. And I explored a little bit with how to rivet the tang of the blade into my sand cast copper handles. So let me run through it, and hopefully I can inspire you guys to make your own cutlery using recycled antique bits of cutlery. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so there's the twig I'm going to use as my handle, and here an assortment of antique knives that I'm going to pick one of to make a cheese knife. These are originally from a fish set, like a set of cutlery specifically made for fish, and that's it, like a fish set. That's why there's this beautiful shape. Apparently they're really good at just pulling the flesh off of a whole fish. But now they're going to be really good at cutting cheese, and I reckon I'll use this one. Oh, look, the blade just broke in my hand. Sorry, the handle just broke in my hand. Anyway, won't take too much to take that off. There we go. Yep, something like that. I'll have to cut this a little bit shorter. Let's get this little twig cast in copper. So I have this big flask. Unfortunately, it's loose, so it doesn't hold together. You will have to get some sort of clamp to clamp it closed, or you can wrap tape around it or wire, just some way to make sure that that stays closed and doesn't come apart. This is the side we're going to start on. Lip down, back from behind. First layer of clay I'm just going to press down with my thumb and fingers. And then the next layer I'm going to compress with my hammer. Better get all my tools out. I'll just pull out all the ones that I'm going to be using. Might use one of these. Use that, use that. Will I use that? Maybe. All right. Hammer. I'm using red clay. This is made by Craig Dabler, who's in the United States, and his sand casting stuff is fantastic. He has a whole range of flasks and acupores and all sorts of contraptions to help make sand casting so much easier. And this is his clay, red clay, and his business or company or brand, whatever you want to call it, is called DIY casting, do it yourself casting. Let's put on some talcum powder. You don't have to use talcum powder. You can use corn flour. It'll do the same sort of thing. I hear people say talc is better because it's finer, but also talc has all that mystery behind it and whether it's carcinogenic or not. So if you feel more comfortable using corn flour, go for it. Alrighty, this is my twig. I've used it a bunch of times now, so I'm very familiar with it. And you might see this section here is not actually wide enough to attach it to that knife, but we're going to do some tricky business in the clay to make up for that. Let's just lay it in the clay for now. I'm going to put it in like that. There we go. And I'm going to lift up the clay a little bit so that, and support it with my fingers behind so that I can sort of get that twig to sit a little bit deeper without putting too much pressure on the twig, because it is my favorite twig. I don't want to break it. So I just lifted up that clay and supported it with my fingers behind so that the clay had a lot more room to move around. I'd rather the clay move out of the way than the twig break. And I'm just making sure that the clay is up to sort of the halfway part of this twig. So I'm just pushing it up so it comes up to meet that organic halfway point of the twig. Don't want any undercuts. There we go. So it's a bit of an undulated surface I'm creating, just following the contours of the twig. Fantastic. And let's dust this off again with some talc, just to make sure that that clay is not going to stick to our little friend twig and not to any exposed clay. Let's put the other half on top. And again, loose crumbly bits of clay, pack it down with your thumb and fingers because you want to make sure that clay is nice and tightly packed in all the crevices and recesses of that design. And I'm almost out of clay with what I've got in front of me. I do have more stashed away, which I'll have to get out, I think. Because look at that, I'm just going to run out of clay. So this has to be filled to the top so it's nice, it's flush with the metal frame, so it has full support. So I'm just going to grab some more clay. All right, I have some clay and I'm just going to chop it up. I don't need it super fine, but I just don't want it as a big lump. I need little lumps, I guess. Just break it up a little bit with my ruler. There we go. Heaps more clay. Smack that on top. And compress it with the hammer. Let's scrape off all this extra clay. There we go. Let's open it up. Now, I haven't quite finished with this yet. So I know if I was to pour metal in it like this, the metal is going to touch this flask and it is going to suck all of the heat out of it, and that molten copper isn't going to go very far because it's getting all the heat sucked out of it. So I have to fill the top of this flask with some clay to insulate that copper from touching the steel of this flask. The other thing I'm going to do is, because my knife blade has quite a wide section here and I want my twig handle to sort of like be able to accommodate that, so I can slot that in there and it be sort of the same dimensions, I'm going to come in with my paintbrush. I'm just going to widen this section and I'm going to deepen it so that that twig no longer has a narrow little skinny end to it. It's going to have a nice big chunky end to it that will hopefully be wide and deep enough to accommodate that knife blade. The other thing I'm doing is I'm sort of turning that into my funnel as well. Let's do it to the other side too. Gently pull my twig out. Pat down these little sections that raised up. Alright, let's add some clay in the top here to stop that molten copper from cooling down too quickly. And now let's widen the end of this twig so that it can accommodate our knife. So I'm just going to push it wider and I'm going to push it deeper. But hopefully in a nice subtle way that means that you can't really tell once you've cast it. I want it to still look like one continuous twig with no messing. Let's chuck in an air vent. Might put in a few air vents. So I'll have one right at the very end here, which is the furthest part from the sprue. So that's to draw all the metal down to the end. Let's do one here as well. And maybe we'll have one more over here. So I've sort of got my main air vent. I feel like this is sort of a main air vent, and I feel like that's where air could get trapped and it needs to escape. It's like a little elbow. And let's just chuck in an emergency exit air vent, just in case. So let's put one here. All right. Let's close it up and cast. I have my little clamps to hold this flask together so it doesn't spill apart when I'm pouring molten metal into it. The other thing I'm going to do is give that clay a little bit of a squish closed, avoiding touching my air vents. And just making sure that those two clay halves on the inside are smushed up against each other and doing their jobs. Fantastic. Melting time. Okay, here we are. I've got my flask set up, my little crucible, and copper. So this is copper that's been stripped from electrical equipment. I have a friend who works at a hospital and they throw out so much electrical cable that has all this copper in it, and she's so good. She sits there and strips it at night to get all the copper out. And then she uses it also for sand casting, but then she also lets me buy it from her. So all my copper cast pieces are 100% recycled copper, which is fantastic to know that I'm doing my part. Tinted glasses. Let's turn that on nice and hot. And let's add some copper. Okay, what's that, like 10 minutes later? Takes a while to melt down copper. It has such a high melting temperature. Okay, but that's looking pretty good now. Just making sure it's all mixed together. There's no lumpy bits on the inside. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that. Ready to pour. Hold it there for a few more heartbeats to make sure it's absolutely as hot as it can be. And then down the hatch. 1, 2, 3. Cool. Alright, wait for that to cool down. And then we'll chop off this excess and start fitting it for the knife blade. Here is our casting. Here is our blade. To protect this shiny blade from getting scratched up or ruined, let's just wrap it in some masking tape. So a lot of these antique bits of cutlery are made from, like, I guess it's sort of like a nickel silver, and then it's silver plated over the top of that. So it's almost like a brassy colored metal underneath this silver plating. And it tarnishes very, very quickly, just like brass does. So it is best to not take the plating off if you can. Otherwise, you'll find you'll have to get it replated if you have taken some of the plating off, because where the plating's removed, it will go quite a yellow color. So let's just protect that plating and protect that polish so we don't have to do any extra work to it. Boom. This is too long. Let's shorten it to about there. Look how deep that goes. So if I'm to be drilling down into this, You're drilling about that deep. That's pretty deep, so I might even have to shorten that again. Let's see how we go. But first of all, let's do the mammoth task of cutting off this giant sprue. It is too big to cut through with my bolt cutters. Unfortunately, the only way to get through this is the old-fashioned way, and that is just to cut it off. And I'm going to cut it off about here, I think. Let's just double check that that will have some clearance. So yeah, I will have to cut the tang of this a little bit shorter so that it fits into this section. Whew. All right, go through it. So we have heaps of room to fit this sheath. I don't know what you call that part. I've forgotten, sorry. All right, let's just take these nasty sharp edges off. So it's going to go in like this, and I absolutely have to shorten the tang. I think that's called a guard. I don't know heaps about knives and their terminology. I mean, I've watched some Forged in Fire, but I wouldn't say I wouldn't say that I have any real knowledge about knives at all. But I do know how to make some cutlery. I want it in the middle. So let's start drilling out. This is the sort of fit we want. Now I have 1.5mm sterling silver wire. That's going to be my rivet. And I'm going to use a drill bit the same diameter. Let's burrow out a little hollow for that rivet to sink into. On both sides. Alrighty, force through that wire. You want it to be tight. Okay, let's knock these all the way through. Alright, so I'm just going to start hammering the copper around that guard and try and force that copper closer to that antique guard so it's a nice tight fit. Looks pretty good. Alright, let's tidy it up. Blend these two sections in. Alright, now I'm going to use this emery wheel. So it's emery paper with Scotch-Brite. I'm going to use that to emery the handle. Alright, I've taken the masking tape off and now I'm going to pop this in my big rotary tumbler. I'm going to leave that in there for about an hour. Cool.
All right, so I've pulled the knife out of the tumbler and it's looking pretty good. I think that's very nice and usable. I've also stamped it with copper, the year, and my maker's mark. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you like and subscribe, and I'll see you for another video. Thank you. Bye.